meeting minutes and reports. Any questions or comments around that report?
Comments. Had a wonderful time last week with that organization.
Yes, go ahead. Greg.
There was a one vocabulary word I wasn't sure of. It's called encumbered. That was on the, what's that column on
Encumbered funds versus
Yes.
unencumbered funds.
Well, I'll let Mr. Hamill address that one. That's more about financial comment.
Sure. Basically, encumbrance funds are funds that have been approved through the PO process and
the what process?
PO, purchase orders.
Oh, okay.
And it's been applied against the budget, so those funds are no longer available to be spent. They're encumbered.
Already spoken for.
Yes.
But they're still in our account.
Yes.
Is that why that's a separate? And
Yes.
if it doesn't say that, then it's been spent. It's already been transferred.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions around that great report?
Yes. There was something on here that I wondered about, and now I didn't make a note in the document. Oh, maybe one question was like the attendance, and I was curious as to like what the thoughts were related to the attendance, like how it looks like it had been like slowly decreasing the percentage of the daily attendance in the early start program. And so I was just more curious around what factors.
Typically, we look lower in that. It has to do with illness as we approach the flu
I
and cold
see.
season. And early Head Start
Mhm.
are 0 to 2s, so they're more likely to catch and stay out with things early on. They're building their immune systems. And we do track costs for attendance, and within the first hour of the day, if a parent hasn't contacted us, we contact them to ensure that, that nothing is amiss.
Okay.
But thank you for checking them out.
Yeah, and then there was one more area where it had like the list of disabilities, I guess that the students were diagnosed with, I guess that would be the right term. And I was just trying to figure out with the non-categorical developmental delay that was listed, that basically means that they didn't fall under any other of these needs.
Typically, at this young of an age, they often have a significant developmental delay, and they haven't labeled or categorized it
Okay.
yet. They may at a later point categorize it, but they may.
Great, thank you. Any other questions around that report? The next one on our that we received is a SPLOST report. February SPLOST report.
Just a general update. Our work at Bernie Harris Lyons Middle School and Coyle Middle School is coming to a close. We believe that by the end of this month, we'll have all of the work associated with both of those renovation projects completed. Mr. Gilbert had an opportunity to meet with the local school governance team and leadership team at Oglethorpe Avenue Elementary School just last night to just review the punch list that still needs to be completed with that project, and that should be completed, we hope, by this spring. Yet there's things associated with the playground equipment and some landscaping and things internally that Mr. Gilbert and his team continues to address. And then the last major item from a construction standpoint is Hillsman Middle School. And right now we're pleased to say that we're online to still occupy by September. Please notice February. And so we're not, that's a tentative date. Please keep in mind also that at the beginning of the project that we projected January of 2020 as a date for occupation. So if we are able to occupy by the fall, as I've noted before to the board and the public, we will do some shifting of dates to give that staff ample time to move in. We may have a Friday where the children at Hillsman don't have school. Teachers would have the ability to move into their new classrooms. again, as I've stated earlier, we believe getting the children out of the old Gaines temporary school as soon as possible would be better for everyone. So that's a general update. We continue to track on the positive side with on monthly revenue as well.
Fantastic, thank you. Any questions around our sponsor report that we received?
Did I miss anything, Mr. Gilbert? Thank you.
Mine's already been answered.
Okay, good. And we have a community oversight committee coming up next
Tuesday,
next week.
the 12th of February.
Of course,
It's open to the public. I believe that those meetings normally start at 8:30.
that's right. Hearing no questions, we'll move on to the third item under letter C. This is the Athens Community Career Academy report.
Yes. I believe there was a PowerPoint that was provided to
Yes.
everyone. It was their LSGT governing board training that took place on January 14th. Athens Technical College, ATC, was the host. And we really appreciated it. It was good. It was good training. Keeping with the tradition that the Career Academy has started with us this year. Ms. Cook from the governing board of the Athens Community Career Academy is here with us this evening. Thank you, Ms. Cook, for taking the time to be here with us. And I think we referenced in January that we've opened the cosmetology lab, and we continue to see good things.
How open is it?
It's very open.
The
Instruction.
community are inquiring, can they come over and use the services there like they do at Athens Tech?
I don't think the children are ready for customers just yet.
I just want you to know there's a wait list.
I don't know if you've noticed, I will be the first. I need to hear that. So,
I have a whole bag of wigs. We are ready to go.
I think that's advanced studies when you do weeds.
They told me they could handle that.
But I think another component of that's really important at the Career Academy, and again, I believe we actually have a board opportunity coming up this spring. I believe it's in February 28th, if I remember correctly. So it'll be February 28th is technically our March work session. And we'll have some light refreshments. And then we want to have a board-on-board conversation. So if you have questions about the Career Academy, that's a great time where there'll be members from that board here as well. But I know that Mr. Harris, Lawrence Harris, and Judge Barron and CJ Amoson, who are the chair and co-chair of that governing board, they're continuing to work with business partners to really figure out what's the next pathway that we need to create. There's a lot of interest in our business community around a manufacturing pathway to be created for our kids. And so we're still trying to explore possible locations for that work. One of the differences with this governing board is that they said they really want to be responsive to the business community. And so as the business community rises up and says, this is where we need employees and workers, that's where it's happening. And I would be remiss if I did not share with you, we're really excited again that the Career Academy has a professor in residence through our Professional Development School District partnership. Dr. Morgan Faison is working with the children who are in pre-education courses, and it's really addressing some of that, building your own educators from the community to stay in the profession and eventually come back and work here in Clark County. So we hope to have more information for you. It's really been positive. And to address some of the comments that have been made around the board table, Dr. Faison, being a woman of color, is a great role model for young people of all backgrounds to know that you can go into the field of education and make a difference with all children. So there's a lot of good things coming from the Career Academy. If you have questions, that's a great time on February 28th for you to have a board-on-board conversation with that very committed group of volunteers from the ACCA board. But again, you saw the presentation of their LSGT/governing training.
Great.
Mr.
Yeah,
President, and Dr. Mills, I really appreciate what you're saying because I'm a former, well, at the time, vocational teachers, career technical education now. But I would love to see some further club affiliations come back to these career programs. And the reason for that, let me give you an example. As a board, we have seen FFA come through many, many times, receiving awards all the way to first place, et cetera. And the reason for that, because when you have club affiliation, what you have taught those young people, they can compete at the district level, they can compete at the state level, right on to the national level. And actually, they're showing off the skills that they have taught and learned from those teachers. Now, I think we have FBLA that is affiliated with the business courses. With the new lab that we have, once upon a time, the club affiliation for that was VICA, Vocational Industrial Clubs of America. And I would like to see that come back because it adds so much to those programs. In this blue booklet here, Dee showed this to me earlier. Robert's Rules of Order. And with those clubs affiliation, they also teach young people how to conduct business meetings, etc. When I took over as president, I think people were wondering why I stuck to Robert's Rules of Order, because I taught it with Victor when I was teaching at Cedar Shoals High School. But anyway, when we have that meeting, most definitely, I mentioned that to Mr. Lawrence Harris and some others. You know, I'd like to see those club affiliations come back based upon what I've said.
I would like to add, we also have Skills USA, which is more broad. So it actually covers a lot of areas as well. So maybe they could share a little bit more for people who are not familiar with that.
Okay. I saw it on our calendar, but I didn't see it indicated. So it's February 28th, and so we're having a
board
retreat of sorts.
So,
Okay.
yes. And then, so it starts at 5:30 p.m.
5:30.
Is it 5 or 5:30?
I thought we said 5.
Okay, it just says work session on our calendar.
Right, but I don't think, I have not added that board on board, but the minutes it said 5, it could be at whatever time you decide.
Oh,
So we'll figure out a time.
okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we can't really leave the Career Academy without talking about that awesome experience we had last week here. Who else was there besides me? Passing out Envision Athens and the career fair that we had in this room where all the different companies were in here and the kids came in and families came in and had a wonderful meal. You guys were, you were doing the legislative thing. Well, we had a wonderful meal. We had lots of guests come through. And what I really like about this, it was Lead Athens that was coordinating this, I believe, or they had a large part in it. And we literally took online surveys of everybody that attended, and I thought that was amazing feedback. So we should have some really good feedback from that experience.
Well, and Clemens is an, I'm sorry, but I thought we had one of our Lead Athens team members here, but it was pretty amazing working with students, and especially the culinary arts students made dinner that night, and it was huge amounts that they had to do. And it was delicious. They did an amazing job.
They took care of all of our dietary needs. And I was able to buy the last of the butter, bread and butter pickles. I'm happy.
We like this.
But they'll be doing
Very
it
good.
again, so we hope that everyone will encourage people to come out, especially middle school age children, and sign them up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions from the board around the Athens Community Career Academy report? Fantastic. Then our next item is a Parent Advisory Board report. We received minutes from a Parent Advisory Board meeting on January 2019. Anything to add to those documents?
We've really been focused on themed meetings. The conversation in January is really around communication and how the Parent Advisory Board can be a tool and a mechanism of getting the good news out about the district. We had another parent advisory board meeting just this past Monday. That topic was around retention of staff and teachers in the district. And I think we had a very lively and informative conversation, getting the perspective of members of the parent advisory board around teachers and what are the different components of retaining them. We'll go over the strategic plan a little bit later this evening, but I've shared before, I'll share again publicly, we're actually, from a human resources standpoint, looking at deploying 3 different surveys in the next few weeks. One survey is around, and then going into the hiring season. One of the surveys is why have you chosen to stay in the district? Because contracts are going out soon, and so if people are choosing to the district, we're curious to know why they're staying. We will obviously do an exit interview and gather data from that perspective. And then when we start hiring new people and they come to the district, we're going to ask, so why did you choose Clark County? So we believe that if we can triangulate that data, that'll give us a better perspective on not only the retention, but also what's drawing people to our school system.
That's great. That'd be very useful. Yes, Mr. Davis.
Where are we in terms of the I know it's still January, but where are we in terms of the hiring process? I know one year, a number of years ago, we gave permission to hire pretty early, I think 25 positions or something.
You did it again this year.
Did we? Great.
You
Great.
did, and Ms. Duke had ahead of the curve. If you go to the Career Center on our district website, she has been working hard all year. There's a new online applicant system that has been launched. We had our monthly principal meeting this Tuesday. Ms. Duke had an opportunity to work with the principals to say your vacancies as identified right now are posted. And so, and I think this is really important for the public and the board to hear. So now the speed in which those vacancies are filled are left up to the building principal. It's not an HR issue at the district level. It's really more of when can principals carve out the time to screen applicants, interview applicants, and then make a recommendation to Ms. Duke and her department. So we very gently, in a very collegial way, said the proverbial ball is in your court now in terms of hiring. We have, I think that applicant link went live January 28th is the date, which is, again, according to the history of Clark County, one of the earliest dates that we've ever launched before. So we appreciate the feedback we've received from the board and the public around launching and getting out ahead of the hiring process. Ms. Duke and others went to a job fair just today in Augusta, Georgia, and there were, I believe, 78. There were over 70 organizations and institutions trying to recruit 48 graduates in the field of education. So I think we can discuss your excellent work at the legislative town hall last week, but I believe it was Dr. Knotts who had the topic around retention of teachers and referenced, I believe, a very salient data point of when you look at all the education, or when you look at all the majors of colleges in 1975, I believe education majors made up almost 25% of all those majors. Today is less than 5%. And so there's just, we talked about this with our principals this week in human resources. You normally talk about generational gaps. And when I entered the education field in 1994, the message was, well, the baby boomers are going to eventually retire. We need more of you to fill the space. And what I shared with our principals was technically my generation is they're starting their countdown for retirement. And so that time goes quickly. And I don't know if we've fulfilled or backfilled with millennials and the next generation, with people interested in education, as much as we did with the baby boomers and Gen X. This is a very competitive field. And then when you consider that in Northeast Georgia, Clark County presents a unique challenge that other districts don't present. It makes our job that much more challenging and fun to try to accomplish.
Well, and that dovetails perfectly with the earlier conversation around the Career Academy and growing your own, because if the reality is we can't rely on just the market that exists in the world to provide us the teachers that we need, the good quality teachers we need, then all the more reason to, I mean, you could probably find 45 seniors in high school who are interested and we give them the means and the pathway to kind of track through and end up teaching here. That could be really a great resource.
And to bring it full circle, I know often people ask the question, so what waivers are we using from our charter school waiver ability? Chef Manny, who leads the culinary arts program for the Career Academy, is one of those. He's an educator that we were able to hire as a result of us waiving the fact that he's not a certified educator. So there are things that we're trying to do to fill gaps where we find gaps. I think the conversation, bringing it full circle to the Parent Advisory Board, I think the best feedback we received from that group on Monday was, how do we expand and really make our mentoring program more robust? Where right now we have a new teacher orientation that happens in July, and people are happy to have a job. And I like to say, you've done your first bulletin board, or you have a vision of what that bulletin board is going to be. There's a lot of excitement. By October, it's real. And things are and there's research around teacher emotions. They dip actually around November and December, right around the holidays, because it just becomes very difficult. That emotion kind of hits a peak again of optimism around March and April. But the months of November through February, they're tough months. And so if you're running into teachers and they're saying, boy, I'm tired, or boy, the children they weren't focused on my instruction the entire class period. I think, please know that that's normal. And that we also understand that there may be some other ways that we can support them. That was one of many very good suggestions.
Great, thank you. Mr. Worthy.
Yes, a couple of things. I was talking about club affiliations a few minutes ago, Dr. Means, and it was discussed in this school district several years ago when I was the principal, but it never got off the ground. But I do know that there are some systems that are doing this. Future Teachers of America. I think it would work. I think Muscogee County was probably one of the first ones that actually started this. I don't know whether they're still doing it or not. The second thing that I wanted to bring to the table tonight, we're talking about these job fairs, and I went on many job fairs as principal, but I went to my alma mater, okay? But we were allowed to take employee contracts with us. Are we still doing that?
We don't, because y'all officially have approval power on this contract, so we don't issue them until after you approve them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Seems like we have,
Yes,
didn't we do that one time? Didn't we give you guys like?
You have
Go ahead.
given us permission to early hire, which means we can hire for positions that we don't know are gonna be vacant.
Uh-huh.
You know, we just kind of work the numbers. We know that we're gonna hire any teachers, so we hire some ahead of time. But that's not official until you guys approve it.
Okay. So that takes an act of approval from us for you guys to take contracts.
Right.
Okay.
And I understand fully what you're saying. And we were told, okay, you don't have to just hire teachers for your school, but I did.
And that's what we
Because
we
if
do.
you start hiring teachers, an elementary teacher, and that teacher end up not getting a job, well, you know what's going to happen there. So, but anyway, I know that it's helpful to do that because you can lose out on a number of teachers. Gwinnett County, Cobb County, and let's see, Fulton County. They were sitting right across from me several years. They were taking them all.
Yeah, we sat in Gwinnett County today. They're gonna hire 2,000 teachers. God bless them. The thing is with the contract, even if we get them to sign them today, they can get out of them until June 15th.
Yes,
without any kind of
yes.
penalty. So there's really, no teeth in the contract in Georgia until after June 15th.
But I found out what Cobb County was doing. They were giving a $1,000 signing bonus. I had a bowl of peppermint. That's all I could get.
It's Fairfield County, I think it's in South
Yeah.
Carolina. We were down in Augusta, so they were giving away 5,000.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Richmond County, okay.
Yeah. Just to do the quick math, that cost us about $1 million, so. For a normal year.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm misunderstood, because I was on the same, that's the question I asked earlier, because I thought we had given human resources, permission to kind of go all the way, but I mean, because to me, one of the advantages of getting a signature is it kind of puts that person kind of like, I got that squared away. Now, that doesn't mean that it's legal, but once people kind of sign on the dotted line, I know you want me, and I've said I want you, and so it seems like that we're in a stronger position of bringing that all the way to June 15th. So I'm kind of with like what Charles is saying. I mean, whatever we can do to give the authority to hire teachers as early as possible, and if a bonus is the way to go, I'm just telling you, I'm on record to do anything at all to recruit teachers. There were a couple of things I just thought of just out of I'm one to talk because I retired at 60 out of education, but I'm just wondering if there are teachers out there that are really doing a stand-up job that maybe we can get them to stay a year or two. It's just one possibility. And the other question I have is in terms of a waiver, Dr. Means, I know this may not be the case anymore, but at one time, getting foreign language teachers was a challenge.
It still is.
Okay, and it just seems like, is that something, do we have any teachers in the district, foreign language teachers who are on a waiver, for instance, that maybe that would be?
I'm not aware of any of our world language teachers on a waiver.
Okay, so I just throw that out there. And then my last question to you, Dr. Means, is if we're putting the responsibility on the principal, which certainly makes a lot of sense, what do we do because sometimes if a principal feels like they're going to the finish line, they've got their letters turned in and they're just kind of waiting until the end of the school year, they may not be as enthusiastic as keeping track of the hiring. I mean,
We help them.
Okay.
We get them over to finish.
Yeah, we get them there.
Okay. Because I'm just saying that and this is kind of like the ghost of Avita, because she was saying that way before I got on the board, but that Clark County, in my opinion, has always had the reputation. This goes back a long time of like being the last one out of the gate. I know I myself wasn't hired until 2 days before school started in August to come to Clark County. So I'm just something that I'm just very, very aware of, and because of our past reputation that I think goes back.
We're trying to turn a page.
Okay.
It's the fact that we posted on January 28th.
Okay.
That's great.
Now, Mr. Davis, what you said a few minutes ago, there's some credence to that. If you're going to do that, let's say if a teacher's planning to retire at the end of the school term, this would be the year to do it. $5,000 raise, $3,000 already been put down on it. That makes a difference because with the teacher retirement system, the last 2 years.
You're right.
It
So
makes a
maybe we'll
difference.
have less retirees this time.
Hopefully.
Dr. Gandy gives us that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, related to this conversation about retention, and the parent advisory board notes, really wanting to, I guess, maybe hear a little bit more about the mentoring programs that are in place, particularly for like those early year teachers. Not that I'm against like sort of incentivizing like the early hiring and people come into the district early, but I think we have to also look deeply at some of the things that are current. I mean, if we get people here early and give them $1,000, 500, 5,000, whatever it may be, and if we don't have the frameworks in place or the infrastructure in place to support the teachers that we have and really sort of dig deeply into the reasons that they're leaving, I think we continue to have the same issues. And so just I'm interested in knowing a little bit more. I know it's not here in the parent advisory board support report specifically, but there are things that continue to come up and related also to some things I know that you shared with us that were really helpful. But I'm just thinking, like, how can our first year, second year, or early career teachers, you know, how can we support them by way of professional development, giving them the space to actually not have everything together, and also layer onto that the unique challenges that we have in Clark County, as well as often teachers are not equipped, you know, to handle behavioral issues. And so you like add all of that in place. It doesn't really matter if we have bonuses. It doesn't matter if we hire early, actually. But they sort of come into an environment where they may not feel supported. They may not be equipped to do the work. I think it can be problematic to assume that undergraduate teaching preparation programs are enough, I guess I should say, to fully equip, you know, teachers. I mean, I think it's a start, but then like, so I would like.
I'll try to be succinct, but I think this will be a topic that we'll get into more when we talk about strategic priority number 5.
Okay.
And hopefully we can talk a little bit about how we will start unpacking it. I don't think you can do it all in one night. It's interesting, you know, we have our cabinet meetings on Mondays, and just this past Monday, we started planning for our new teacher orientation and recognized, so we started a conversation among ourselves that we have to make a transition with our mentor program from it being more of a buddy program of I'm the new teacher, Greg, my mentor, he shows me where the copying room is. He shows me where the faculty lounge is, and he tells me when to turn in papers. That's a typical mentoring relationship. We believe that we have to take a more just-in-time, building professional capacity approach to mentoring, where it's just not the new teacher orientation days, and then we don't, you know, we have sporadic conversations with them, but we have a very deliberate professional development plan for the first 2 years that you're in the organization. So it's going to take some time for us to make the pivot, but that it was ironic that we started that conversation in our cabinet meeting, and then that evening when parent advisory board members were giving us counsel, that was their counsel. I've heard a lot in the community where teachers want support. And it was interesting to have the parent advisory board say, so we'll decode that for you. That support is in the name of people want just-in-time strategies and skills that they can utilize and leverage in classroom situations, not just when you get hired in July, but when it's November, when it's December, and so forth.
That's great.
And there's so much involved in that buddy system work that we need. What you example you gave a few minutes ago, it actually works. But there are so many other things involved in retaining our teachers. Okay, I'm gonna say one thing. I'm gonna leave it alone. I'm not trying to be facetious. You hire young ladies fresh out of college. They come to Athens, Georgia. 2 years they hadn't found a husband. Bye. They're gonna leave you.
So the HR director, me would say we should probably,
That's right.
pivot away from this conversation.
So many things.
Thank you, sir.
I think what you're hearing loud and clear from the board is we want to be supportive in your efforts to effectively hire, effectively retain.
I believe
And so-
that, absolutely.
To the extent there are things that you need from us in our governance perspective, please keep us involved and let us know how we can be
I
supportive.
think you've been giving us great direction of how you want us to address all of our employees. We spent a lot of time this evening talking about teachers, but I believe that the direction from this board is all of our employees in the organization.
Great.
And so we have taken heed to your word. The final thing I would say around teachers in HR is that on March 23rd, we'll be hosting our Clark County School District Career Fair. I believe it's at Clark Central again.
Yes, sir.
March 23rd, I believe that's a Saturday, 9 a.m. sharp. So it was a great success last year, and we think we'll have even better results this year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to section D of our agenda. This is the minutes of previous meetings. We received minutes from our work session January 3rd, 2019. Any questions or additions to those minutes? Hearing none. The next minutes we received were from a regular meeting, January 10th, 2019. Any questions or revisions to those? Like ages ago, right? We also received minutes from a called board meeting, January 17th, 2019. Any comments or additions to those? Fantastic, and thank you very much for the preparation of those minutes. They were fantastic, as they have been for many months. Moving on to section E, financial reports. We received financial reports from November 2018. Any questions or comments around the financial reports? We also received December financial reports for 2018. Any questions or comments on those? Yeah, getting very much more timely with our financial reports. We appreciate that work that's gone into that. And I see that there are KPIs associated with the November ones, not quite the December ones yet. Is that right?
Sorry?
KPIs we received for the November reports, but not the December ones.
I'm sorry they were not posted. I'll make sure they get posted.
Okay, great, thank you. Section F, policy. We have one policy, policies, regulations, exhibits to be posted for public review for 4 weeks. And we have policy GBO, professional personnel resignation. This is, it's proposed that this policy go out and for public review for 4 weeks. Any questions or comments around this policy or additional information from our policy committee?
No, I think we're interested in hearing what the public has to say.
Fantastic. We also have number 2, policies to adopt or rescind. So these are policies that have been out for 4 weeks, and there is a significant list that I will quickly read through. We have policy GAEB, harassment, which has been reviewed. Exhibit GAEB-E1, employee harassment investigation checklist. Exhibit GAEB-E2, employee harassment complaint form. Exhibit GAEB-E3, employee harassment complaint investigation report. Regulation GAEB-R1, harassment. Policy GAF, staff-student relations. Policy GAMA, drug-free workplace. Regulation GAMA-R1, drug-free workplace. Policy GBD, professional personnel hiring. Policy GBKA, professional personnel layoff. Regulation GBKA-R1, professional personnel layoff. Policy GBT, professional publishing. Policy JAA, equal educational opportunities. Exhibit JAA-E1, student harassment investigation checklist. Exhibit JAAE2, Student Harassment Complaint Form, Exhibit JAAE3, Student Harassment Complaint Investigation Report, and Regulation JAAR1, Equal Educational Opportunities Review. So again, these have been out for 4 weeks. Have we received any comments on any of them? No, no public comments. Any questions? So it is proposed that at our regular board meeting, we vote to adopt these as they're written. Any questions around any of these policies or regulations, exhibits?
Seems like we've been talking about it for months.
It's true.
They've been around a little while.
Right.
I have a quick question, like, the policies in the area of harassment, like student harassment, those types of things, how is this communicated to schools? Yeah, I mean, other than like being available in the policy,
How is it sort of enacted and handled,
yeah.
put to work?
Yeah, and how are we aware, you know? Yeah, how do we monitor that? First, how do people in schools know,
Mhm.
Other than like needing to go and, find
Sure.
a policy? Yeah, and then how do we stay, on top of it?
Good question.
Dr. Myers?
So multitude of ways. One way is they're all referenced in the Code of Student Conduct. So in the very front of the code, not only is it a violation of the code harassment, but there's policy around it. And so we reference and list all those policies. So if you wanted to cross-reference and say, I want to know more, we don't repeat all the policies in the code, but we reference them.
And that goes home to every student at the beginning of every
Every student
year.
gets a paper copy home and it's online, available for parents. And then, our counselors and our support staff embed lessons about harassment and understanding the definition of harassment in the classroom guidance and the advisement lessons that they do with students. So I would say that's another area in our curriculum that we have for social emotional learning, like second step at the elementary school in developmentally appropriate language for elementary schoolers. They're going to begin learning about issues of harassment and what that means. At all the levels that would happen. And then as far as when complaints are reviewed by Meredith Paget, there's a whole documentation and reporting system that is monitored and maintained with her. But it's a continual process. I'll say,
And she trains administrators on that
That's
process every year. She'll review it with people, and if a new person comes, a new administrator, she'll go over it with them individually.
And so it sounds like there's not necessarily a standard policy or practice around the minimum that schools need to do depending on the type of situation. So for instance, if something happens at an elementary school versus like a high school or a middle school, or like the minimum that's needed, like with either counseling, so if the counselors are wrapped in some kind of way, like how we address these situations from
in the prevention aspect or intervention.
I guess I'm speaking more of intervention, but which is why I asked up front, like what's sort of done at the beginning so that people are, like aware of this.
Those are all the ways training administrators and, it's not mandated in state law like it is for child sexual abuse prevention lessons, which have requirements, or suicide prevention lessons. There's not that requisite requirement. But I would say in every situation where harassment is alleged, investigated, and attended to, they're all so different that our whole array of support services are deployed to meet the needs of the alleged, the victim, to further, we debrief about those situations. We come, to meet with school staff and talk about.
But I understand where Dr. Gant's going. I get it. So maybe my career pathway has been, has just informed me. So when I was a human resources director, I entered a school system that had just settled a major harassment settlement between two teachers. And as a result, we had a cadence where we said, okay, every school year, in the first week of school, we are pushing all of our counselors, social workers into classrooms, and we're reviewing this policy. And oh, by the way, every principal is mandated to check off and tell us that they have gone over the policy with their faculty. And it's just not at the beginning of the year, but then you do it at in the middle of the year. I don't know, Dr. Gant, is that what you are you referencing maybe that type of
Yes.
standardized cadence?
So yeah, I was curious about that and first, and then like how do we build on that with our whatever we do from a standard approach. So when we have people that are in these situations, how do we know that we're doing right is such a relative term, but how do we know we're offering as much support as we can? First, how do we know that we're educating them on the policy consistently and with fidelity? Then how do we know that we're also offering enough support? So whereas if something happens, let's just say at Clark Central or Timothy, and I'm only using those schools because that's where my kids are, but like, are the same things happening to address these issues when they come up by way of supporting victims, as well as those students who have been accused? I was just more so interested in how do we share this policy, but then how do we actually be sure that we're providing the support that goes along with the policy?
That's really, excuse me, that's really difficult to do that. And you hit the nail on the head, Dr. Means, because I did this, okay? But when I was doing it, that was then and this is now. And I'm assuming it's much easier because teachers have all of this technology. They should have a laptop or something in their classroom. All you got to do is just go to the website there and then navigate through these policies. But when I was a principal, you had a great big blue notebook with all of these policies in there. As Dr. Mott said a few minutes ago, you had the student code of conduct. Now, for the first week of school, all right, every teacher at Cedar Shoals High School actually taught this in the classroom with the students. Because I said to them, when I walk in your classroom, this is your lesson plan for that first week. But you can't dwell on it for the entire year simply because of the fact that you got a curriculum that you got to follow. Now, some of it, you're not going to really get into it until something happens. Then you're going to have to apply that policy, as our president went through a few minutes ago. But this principal is responsible for these things to happen to make sure that people are aware of the fact that, hey, we have policies to follow. Don't do something outside of these policies. Then you come to me, then it's too late. But anyway, you dwell on that, as Dr. Lee said a few minutes ago, at the beginning of the year, like pre-planning, and then of course, it's good to go back to it sometime in the middle of the year, But like I said, you can't spend a tremendous amount of time on it because you have a curriculum to follow.
So toward creating that awareness, and again, my only other experience is that every year we actually have to go through this training, and we have to certify that it is required.
We do that
And
with
so
all
I think
employees.
all of our employees have to do that.
Absolutely.
But that's the bottom,
It's a sign off.
the basic sign off.
Yeah.
You have to do. So we do that, and I think we do that here too. But beyond that, I've just heard awesome responses to incidents that we've had in the school from Dr. Myers and her team in terms of how they wrap the services around children that are impacted by any type of allegation like this or anything that comes along in that way. So I've heard glory reports of the efforts that come down.
And I would say our teachers play a large role in this. I see a lot more brave, bold conversations embedded in, the teaching of a text that has themes of, so it's not only, it has to be an example based on our students. It might be something they're reading and studying, and the teachers are inviting support staff to come support a conversation with students and understand issues like harassment while they're learning in social studies or English. So a lot more of that is happening, and that's where the real learning and making connections happens. But I appreciate your question.
Yeah.
Dr. Gant, we'll look at how do we know that we're providing the minimal level of support, what does that look like?
Both for employees and for students, all the way
Right.
down, right? Thank you.
I have a procedural question with regard to our policies to adopt and rescind. Just anticipating next week's meeting, are we going to vote on those one at a time or put them all together?
I have typically enjoyed reading all of them individually and then voting on them together. And then if there are individual ones that we'd like to pull out, we can pull them out before we do that.
Anticipating a smooth running, quick meeting.
Good, yeah.
And is the 4-week period closed? No.
It
Is
is,
it already closed?
No, it's from the date they're posted at
That's
the
right.
meeting to the voting.
to the
So
vote.
I'll give you another update. I'll be asked again the same question next week. Do we have any additional public comment? And if I get it in between now and next Thursday, I'll provide it to you electronically as soon as I get it.
And sometimes we do, sometimes we get some great comments and we've made changes based on some of those comments. Fantastic. Moving on to section G of our agenda. This is for the superintendent's report.
I'll try to be very succinct. First and foremost, I would like the board and community to know that it is National School Counselor Week. So if you know a counselor, give them a hug and tell them they're doing good work. We have an amazing counseling group, and it's our plan this spring to have more conversations with you around social emotional learning. And so you'll get to meet our director of school counseling and SEL along with Dr. Myers and the rest of our team. So we're really excited about the opportunity for you to have these conversations, but just wanted to emphasize the fact that it is National School Counselor Week. Also want to just congratulate all the young people who were part of the Clark County School District Spelling Bee today. It was really neat bringing it full circle with the Career Academy. Again, I think they were live streaming the competition. So that was, if you've ever come into the Career Academy, they use the same screen that you use during the board meetings to watch things. And today the viewing of choice was the spelling bee. So it was really nice and fun. We, per the board's request, and I think you mentioned it maybe at the last board meeting, but we've been working on this actually for months. We have a 2-year strategic plan. You enacted the strategic plan in June of 2018. And so technically we are already 1 quarter into the strategic plan and the work that we said we were going to do in hard copy. But if there are any public members who want to go on board docs, our strategic plan update for the first quarter has been completed. I want to thank our team that consists of Dr. Zenona Thomas, was kind of our project manager of making sure it was always being done. James Barlament, Eve Embry, Dee Vodka, and then everyone in the organization weighed in on this in one way, shape, or form. I don't want to go through each component of it. I would like to go to the table of contents. It's my hope that in the next few months we can spend some time unpacking one of these many topics. We could spend a meeting just discussing one of the items. But what you will see here, what we try to do is to frame this document in a way where it's readable to the public. We actually had a strategic plan steering committee. And that steering committee consists of community members who helped us develop this plan. We met with them earlier this week. They provided feedback of saying, don't just give us the current data. Can you give us some indication of things going well? So you'll see in front of each strategic priority, there's a success story that we can talk about. It ranges from Gaines Elementary School and the academic achievement that has been recorded by their 2nd grade math team, or Oglethorpe Elementary School and the leap that they made in their milestones and RPI score. We really haven't talked a lot about it, but they made a significant leap this year that they should be credited for. Or if you go to, we talk a lot about social emotional learning, which is strategic priority number 2, and we're concerned about attendance. You'll see in this document that attendance is an issue. We wanted to highlight 2 schools that are doing well. And so it's the students at Timothy Road and Whitehead Road Elementary School. They're doing good work there. I don't want to read them all to you. I do want to highlight, I think we were able to find some really good things to celebrate, ranging from Mr. Hamill and his team. We haven't talked about the fact that we submitted a balanced budget last year. Our fund balance continues to grow. That we're one of only about 25 to 30 school districts in the state of Georgia with a AA bond rating. So that puts us in the top 14% of the state of Georgia for that type of rating. That's good, and something that we should celebrate. And you can look at the strategic priority number 5 success story of, we've talked a lot about trying to grow our pool of candidates and eventually diversify our teaching force. But when you compare our teaching force to the national average, we have a very diverse teaching force right now. Obviously, we want that to improve and grow, but we should take time out to say we're doing good work right now. Under strategic priority number 3 in terms of success, the fact that between the time period of August and now, we have key performance indicators for every department in this organization is impressive. And we press people on developing those key performance indicators. And you may say, well, that sounds very wonky. That sounds very superintendent-y to want to talk about key performance indicators. But let me tell you how it actually impacts children. So one of the key performance indicators for our Clark County School District Police Force is that we are doing some type of external check of all of our schools, including our elementary schools, on a daily basis.
What does that mean?
What it means is there's some type of exterior check. Are we checking the doors? Are we looking around the perimeter to see if things are safe? I'll take off my employee hat and put my parent hat on. If we have a police force, I want to, at a minimum, know that someone's checking the perimeter of my child's school on a daily basis. And it should be a police scientist. It should be someone who understands law enforcement. That it is having a significant impact on our ability to do community policing, because now elementary school staff, they're seeing our police force on their grounds, and not just for the crisis, but just they're there to make sure kids are safe. And now there's conversations happening where classroom teachers are saying, do you mind coming and reading to our kids? And that's, so often we talk about breaking the school to prison pipeline. That's how you break it, through community policing. That came from our KPIs. You're going to hear from transportation this evening. We work with that team to identify, so what's the age of our fleet? How many of our buses have air conditioning? I don't know about you, it was a little warm today, and it's going to get warmer. And so to have air conditioning, that's something we should track. So when you look under strategic priority number 3, having those key performance indicators is really critical. So what I would like to do, again, this is available to the public, and there's a lot of data in this document. I would love to start taking time at each one of our working meetings just to unpack one of these items, and allowing the board to ask questions. There is such a rich document that I would not do justice to it to say, well, look at this part or that part. I think it actually reveals the type of work we're trying to do as an institution. It's the old adage of what's measured is what gets done. And what we're trying to say is we can measure every essential component of working with our kids, and making sure that things are in a good place for our children. John Cleghorn, who's our leader of plant services, has just as much of an impact on teaching and learning as a chief academic officer does, because if the HVAC doesn't work in a school, it's hard to teach and learn. And so if you look under key performance indicators, there's an indicator on how often does the HVAC goes down on a either weekly, monthly basis. And you see all the different, the rhythm that we've tried to create in terms of measuring this work. And then finally, we talk about success, we talk about data, and then we talk about the work that we're going to do to change the data. And so under action steps and tactics, which is page 58 through 63, you see the work that we're focused on. And I think that's really critical for the board and the community to know. So we're working on things. We are committed to getting better every day. And getting better every day includes implementing these action steps.
So 58 to 63 is sort of the, this is the most pressing to-do list for the administration.
Yes.
With like the data that you have here is no small job. So thank you.
It is absolutely.
I just almost wrote
I
it in
can
there.
leave it now, I'm good.
But I do have a question. I love how we already have a column sort of set up for the same time to be able to look across these areas each year. One question I have is, how do we go about sort of maintaining the credibility or the validity of our data? Like, so we're looking at, let's just say if we specifically with the student like performance indicators, how are we sure, like in our eyes, we might see a decrease, let's just say, or an increase in, I don't know, reading level or something like that from June of this year to June of next year compared to baseline. And with our eyes, that looks great. But how do we know? I don't think, I should say that there's no way to know about all of the other confounding variables, but how do we shore this up even more from a, I don't know. I don't know that I'm trying to say an empirical standpoint, but how do we be sure that we are really digging deep to know that the things that we're doing are what's causing the improvements?
Yes.
Or it could be the other way, where we might see some things that we're not so happy with, but there could be a couple of other things that are either interacting or, I don't know, mitigating some of these things. So how do we, maybe that's more of a long-term thing once we start like going through it, because I want to spend a bit more time with it, but I think it's great. I really do.
So, and we haven't shared all the data with you. And so next fall, because I want to have some time to work with our principals, but next fall, I would like at least one school a month to come to you and say, so here's our school growth plan. And I think it's really critical, because when you look at our charter system, the most critical work of a local school governance team is to approve the school growth plan. And it's a 2-year plan. And the question that I typically, I'm asking principals every day, and parents should ask their principal every day, is what systems and processes do you have in place to improve the results my school is getting? That shouldn't just be a question that I'm asking as superintendent. That should be a question that board members are asking me, that parents are asking their principal. What systems and processes do we have in place? Or technically, it would be that you have in place to improve the results for our school. So I think that answers a little bit of your question. I think the other thing is, statistically, the indicators of college and career success are statistically valid in predicting student success. And so all those indicators, and we can unpack it, but James Barleman and Dr. Thomas and I, we've studied it, and we know that the research shows that if for example, under the indicator, I think it's indicator 5 or 6, the research shows that if a student completes Algebra 2 by the end of their sophomore year, that the statistics show that they will persist through at least their first year in college, or they will persist through their first year in an apprenticeship or some type of post-secondary pursuit. And so every indicator that has been identified demonstrates that if you do these things, you'll be successful. That's why we use the language. We're not saying we're making kids college and career ready. We don't want them ready. We want them to be successful. And so that means a child choose to go into the military. We want them to be the very best soldier they can be. If they choose to go into the workforce, we want them to be the very best contractor they can be. If they choose to go to college, we want them to be prepared in the very best 2 or 4 year college student they can be. There are statistical connections between this work. You'll see, I think it's on page 6 and 7, we talk about the NWA MAP scores. We know if you hit a certain score on the MAP score that they predict that you will then persist and do well in high school and then conversely in college. That's why I'm really excited that we can unpack this. The profile of a CCSD graduate. We spent a lot of time on this with our steering committee. We know statistically if a student takes a certain core of courses that they will persist post-secondary regardless of their path that they choose. And so you can see right now what percentage of our kids are, and I know it's somewhat small print, so I apologize, but and we can, again, if you get this electronically, you can blow it up for your own purposes, but those courses that kids are choosing to take right now and receiving a 2.75 GPA is not where we want it to be. And so I don't want to veer too much, Dr. Gay, but I think we know that we've kind of created a system that can tell us how kids are doing, and it can be predictive.
And it sounds like it's both on that, our ability to ask that question, what are you doing to make sure that success is happening, and how do you know you're doing the right thing, right? So there's the what are you doing is here's the plan, and then how do you know it's the right thing is perhaps in the footnotes that aren't there about tying the research-based data around these data points are relevant. Therefore, we should measure these data points. And I think in our, that this is a 2-year strategic plan gives us the opportunity. We know when we're going to check back and say, okay, is there new data we need to put into the strategic plan, new research? Does it still pass the gut test on other things? And so we can update these measurements, it sounds like. But I just, I want to echo what's already been said. This is absolutely incredible. If we can, keep on this and maintain the fidelity to this sort of measurement and this sort of transparency and this sort of, this is sort of keeping your eye on the prize about what matters for our kids. And I hope we're able to kind of, celebrate this.
I am.
Yeah.
This is truly amazing work. Thank you all.
Absolutely.
This is
Really, truly
6
great
years
work.
in the making. Woohoo!
Yeah, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I think it's, I think it's great to have the information, in terms of the scorecard and everything. I guess I'm trying to put together because I'm looking at the MAP scores, just very cursory, and they're all over the board in terms of variation. And is there, and I know each school is going to be responsible for improving those scores. But is there a place where schools kind of share with each other in terms of schools that are more successful, maybe sharing what they're doing that will make them stand out?
So yes, we put this in a heat chart, or statistically, we call it a heat chart. The red means that you are 39% or below. The yellow means that you're in the 40% range. The green means that you're at 50%, and blue means that you're 60 or above. And kids took the MAP test or MAP assessment in the fall, and they received a score. And MAP says statistically that at least 50% of your students should hit the predictive point that they are supposed to be in the winter. And so you will see here that there are some schools and grade level specifically, that we're able to identify that. So Barnett shows first grade, 60% of their kids hit their mark that they were supposed to be in terms of showing growth from the fall to the winter. We know that from a predictive standpoint, that if children are doing well on math, then now we know what we need to do for the milestones, and if they're going to do well on milestones or not. This entire infrastructure is different from a school district standpoint, because prior to this system, we just kind of hoped and crossed our fingers and hoped that they would do well from one April to the next April. Now we know where we need to target our attention and focus. And this data even allows us to go down to each teacher and how each classroom performed. And I want to say this very clearly: the data that we have right now isn't being used to criticize the work. It's to say, so where do you need resources? Does a school need more resources to help their performance? And so it was through this analysis that we were able to look at, there's a bright spot, there's a blue bright spot at Gaines Elementary School that should be celebrated. You know, every so often everyone wants to say what isn't happening at Gaines. We should celebrate what's happening at Gaines. They had greatness, the most significant growth of all of our classrooms at the elementary level. That 63.5, that bested everyone. I think it also, there's Whitehead Road Elementary School. That principal is on fire. He is focused on helping his teachers grow their capacity. He said, well, while I don't like the yellow, I want to see more green. And what do I need to do? So he started having conversations with classroom teachers that he couldn't have had a year ago. And again, I think I've shared with you some of the failure rate data that we have at the high school and how that's changing conversations. All this information is to help build capacity and help children grow, and also help that our operational departments are more efficient. It was through our development of KPIs where I asked the question of our chief of police, so why do we have a police department? What's the purpose of it? And he says is to implement community policing in our schools. And so from that conversation, we were able to say, so why aren't we going to our elementary schools and checking the perimeter and saying hello to the children and breaking down this barrier that starts to grow at a very early age? I think I've used the terminology before, but we can do things differently and be more efficient. I think everyone is working hard. I don't think there's no debate. There's no doubt that people are working hard. Everyone is working hard in Clark County. We believe that through this type of analysis and look at things through an organizational lens, that we can work smarter.
Well, and like you said before, without this, I mean, if we reflect back, it was sort of like, let's try this program, cross our fingers, try something else, cross our fingers, and hope for a different result in April. But this is, I mean, you can be smart and targeted in a way that is, and so while we may not be super thrilled with every data point that's on there, we're not going to be, but we know the data points, right? We know sort of where to look and what to. And from an administration side, what to,
We know what they mean.
Right.
And that's the difference.
And from a board perspective, we can dive in and say, well, help us understand this better, help us understand that better, and then.
So case in point, and I'll try to summarize here. But case in point, there's a lot of community conversation around how we need more counselors and social workers and folks in the SEL world to work with our kids. That's anecdotal. I can point to the data and say, well, when I look at the attendance, we probably should have more social workers who are checking in with children and asking why are so many children not coming to school. And we know the correlation between school attendance and academic achievement. Now, let's have a conversation about how many more counselors and social workers we need, because the data points to a gap.
And how we're gonna pay for it.
And how-
How's it gonna be reflected in the budget?
And that's why we want to congratulate Larry for doing well on strategic priority 4. Because if he's not doing well with strategic priority 4, we can't talk about what can we add. This is really about how we want to look at our work differently. It's also a commitment that we made to the board administratively, because you committed to being a balanced governance board. Well, you can't implement balanced governance without data, because you're supposed to have enough data at your fingertips to say, so why isn't something happening? Or why aren't we seeing more of certain things? Now you will have a platform that can really give you insight and ask more questions, and ask questions that are not anecdotal because someone stopped you in the supermarket, but it's because here's what the data is telling us.
Yeah, and one thing, Dr. Means, and I think that some of this will be addressed when we start the, schools coming and presenting to us. Because when I look at this, of course, immediately I jump to, okay, well, what is this particular school going to do differently? Knowing this information, what are they changing, or what are they doing differently? And that's something that I know we've got some action steps that are on the district level in terms of, at least from what I've scanned, that they're more kind of what the district is doing to try to pull things together or that type of thing. But you don't get a sense of what an individual school is doing, and so that's obviously something that would be addressed when the schools make the presentation starting.
Is that already in the school improvement plan?
If you go out to each school website, you can see their school growth plan, and Mr. Davis, that addresses that question.
But they didn't have this at the time when they did it.
Yes, they did. So they actually, and we delayed the final implementation of the school growth plans because they wanted to see what their data was from the fall. And so the fall, actually, it's a blur. I don't know if there was a fall because we were gathering all of this and trying to create an infrastructure. All the data that we gathered from August to, I would say, it was mid-October. The school improvement teams, the LSGTs and the principals said, okay, here's our gaps. What are we going to do in the next 2 years to close these gaps? So if you go out to their school growth plans, that's their best effort to address literacy, numeracy, and social emotional learning.
What about, because I was looking at attendance, so that's integrated in on each.
James Berleman and Eve Embry did amazing work, and so they went back to the 2017-2018 school year to give schools their baseline data on attendance and behavior and suspensions and everything else to tell us what's happening and what that baseline actually indicated for people. So I would we didn't want to kill a lot of trees in 2019, but if you go out to a school website, you will see their school growth plan. The month of February and March, the final piece of plans are going to be uploaded. They're going to start working on their equity plans. And so what our equity work, and we do want to have our new board members have the same opportunity for the equity training that veteran board members have had. But our equity training has encouraged schools to go deeper, to look at their disproportionality based on strategic priority number 6 and identify what we want to do for children who are disproportionately being either disciplined or underachieving. Dr. Welch from the University of Georgia is in the back, but he is working on a study right now looking at our disciplinary records over the last 5 years, some very telling data that's emerging. There's 4 groups of students who are disproportionately disciplined in this district. It's students who are special ed, it's students who are homeless, it is male students, and it's African American students. And so when you start the cone and looking at that cone and whittling down the issues. So if you are a black male in this district, while they represent about 20 to 25% of the overall population, they represent 50% of all the students and all the disciplinary issues. And so that's why, as a board, you identified as one of your priorities, priority number 6, around disproportionality. And so the charge that you've given us is, so what are you going to do about it? So what systems and processes do you have in place to stop what I believe to be a travesty, which is if you are a black male, or if you are a black male in special education, it's probable that you're going to be disciplined. So what do we need to do to build capacity? So that to all kind of ties together. How do we build the capacity of staff to make sure that when you do face that student, which is likely because of our demographics, how do we make sure that we don't jump to discipline right away for those kids? That's what this work is meant to allow us to have conversations around. It's not to say that people aren't working hard and their hearts aren't in the right place. I think everyone's hearts and the work that they're doing is amazing. But if we can really drill down to what can we do differently to change this path that we're currently on, which everyone wants, I think we can be a better system, but more importantly, it helps our kids.
Fantastic, thank you.
I'm so happy to see this. Honestly, my internet's too slow. I didn't get to download. I've got to come over.
So it's on board doc.
So I've got it now.
Okay.
So I just wanted to ask a question about the map scores here and the way that they're displayed here. And I wanted, because you mentioned about how we can then see maybe how they're gonna do on milestones. But my understanding of the way this is presented is that what this is showing is the percentage of students who are showing normative growth.
Yeah.
Or the amount of growth that's predicted for them. And so this isn't actually showing us anything about what their scores actually are.
No, I mean, so you could be a student who is underperforming, but the logic is if you are demonstrating academic growth from the fall to the winter, that probable growth is going to continue into milestones, which
Yeah,
takes place in
I sort of felt bad bringing this up because I definitely prefer this way of looking at it, like looking at how much did they grow or who grew and
Right.
did most people grow. But I also know that milestones is sort of how students are evaluating, how schools are evaluated. And so being able to kind of
Well,
see.
Maybe that's how they're evaluated. Yeah, but I appreciate it, and we'll bring this back to you. Maybe that's how they're evaluated in Georgia for now.
Yeah.
So there is a pilot at the Department of Education level where there are a group of school systems, and Mr. Barlowman has been in contact with this network of schools that are using the NWA MAP assessment as an alternative to milestones. The Department of Education has an opportunity to file a waiver with the Department of Education at the federal level to say these schools may want to use MAP instead of milestones. We haven't jumped into that network yet because the way that pilot's working, you have to provide the milestones and provide MAP testing. And we want to jump in the network when we are able to say we don't want to do milestones anymore. We just want to do MAP. So we're hoping in the next year or so that we can take advantage of a waiver from the DOE to not do milestones anymore. Because we believe that that's a better indication of it should be about growth. It shouldn't be about if you hit a mark. That we all know that high stakes testing just isn't healthy for kids.
That's great, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Yes, Dr. Moss.
Again, kind of just a procedural thing. So I really like the idea of digging into these. What is the appropriate chunk per work session that you want to do? Would it be one strategic priority at a time, or is that too much?
I think so. For priority one, that would be too large. What I'll do is I'll put something out to the group to ask you what do you want to start talking about first. There may be some natural alignment with some of the work sessions in the future and strategic priority two, for example. And so we can, but it's really it's your meeting, so you get to decide what chunks you want to get into.
I think too, looking at those 6 items that you identified to pass, 5 or 6 priorities, I think that you felt like we need to be paying attention to, would be also candidates for some of those discussions as well. Thank you.
The last thing I have to share for this report, I apologize for the one, is that on March 2nd, 2019, in Louisville, Miss Mary Walsh Wickwire is working on a flyer that will be placed on the website in the next week or so. But on March 2nd, we will have a community conversation about this first quarter update and to get people's opinions on, so here's the data, what do you think? And so that's March 2nd. There will be also 3 different dates that I will engage and talk with staff about, and we'll advertise those dates internally. But we're going to go on. We want to hear from the public now, in terms the public and staff, in terms of, so what do you think? I mean, so for example, under those action tactics, there may be other tactics people may want to recommend or give us feedback on. So right before spring break, we want to just get some more feedback, and we don't want this just to be a sitting document. It's got to be a living document. Part of it being a living document is to just go out and have discussions around it. So we'll talk with staff and we'll talk with the community. It's a Saturday because so often people are busy during the week. So we just wanted to carve out a Saturday morning, and people can come and join us. The community session again is March 2nd from 10 a.m. to noon here at H.D. Edwards building. That's the conclusion of my report.
Fantastic. And again, thank you for all the hard work that's been put in this. I'm excited to watch this grow, and to see the progress and know that it is progress, right, in a meaningful way, and not just sort of the spinning of whatever data suits a particular narrative. But the reality is we have lots to draw from. Moving on to section F of our agenda, consent agenda discussion. So we have a number of items that are proposed we include in the consent agenda for our meeting next week. The first is a number of field trips, out of state and overnight field trips. Any questions or comments around those? Consent, sound okay to include in our consent agenda?
Sure.
Great.
I agree.
We have, the next item is the intent to apply for a pre-kindergarten summer transition program grant.
I've just got some questions about it.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
One is this, do we do this every year, or has it been available every year?
Yes, sir. We have applied for it every year that's been available. We have been one of the sites that has piloted the summer transition program for the pre-kindergarten, as well as summer transition program for upcoming kindergarten.
And what are the numbers that we typically are able to include?
Each classroom is capped at 14.
Okay, so how many classrooms are there?
2. We have
One for
one for Rising K and one for Rising Pre-K. They're 6-week programs. The Rising Pre-K is designed by the state to target those students who are lingually diverse and need kind of a precursor to coming into pre-K, a little experience. And then the pre-kindergarten is designed for students who were not able to participate in pre-K, and therefore have an opportunity to have a pre-experience coming into kindergarten for school readiness, or who were not able to participate with fidelity. They may have started pre-kindergarten late, had more than 30 days, or needed a little additional time to have that pre-kindergarten, pre-real school readiness for kindergarten.
So how long have we been doing this, roughly? Years?
I can look up and see what first date that the summer transition program was available. We've done it every year that I've been here.
Because I'm just what I'm getting at is that, first off, if it's made a difference, if it's been successful, if we have the data for that, and if we do, this seems like something that we could talk to the state legislature about increasing, because, you know, if, it would seem like that the need is much vaster than what we're able to bring to Clark County. And so I just didn't know if that's, because it seems like legislators listen more if you have specific programs that you say, this works, this is the data, why don't you double that, for instance? Is that something that is available to us in terms of?
We could certainly look at the data. I think the opportunity for students to participate in a year-long program puts them in a better position to be school ready for kindergarten.
Sure they do.
But it does give us an opportunity for students who were not able to participate or couldn't have that length of time to participate, but certainly I'd be happy to collect them.
I mean, do we have a lot more students that have not participated in the year-long program and we're kind of doing this as a stopgap? Or not? Maybe there's not that
We have a
many.
waiting list that are unable to get into our kindergarten, and it gives them an opportunity to participate for a shorter period of time, but still an opportunity to have that pre-kindergarten experience.
So the best solution is to go ahead and do what you wrote the grant for the larger
Yeah,
program.
at this point, 2 classrooms is what is available to us to apply for. We are applying for the maximum that's available for Clark County. In the past, when we've had an opportunity to apply for additional classes, we have done so.
Sounds like a great opportunity. I would just be interested to see if we track.
With your legislative
We do,
committee
yes,
hat on.
sir. So I'm happy to provide that data.
Thank you. Consent, is that okay? Great. The next item is the approval to purchase 4 new Bluebird buses from state bond funds. Should we put that in the consent agenda?
Why not? State bond funds.
Okay, excellent. We will. The next item is to approve the purchase of 5 new Bluebird buses from SPOS 5 funds. Should we put that in the consent agenda? You have any questions?
Yeah, just a quick question.
Yes.
What type of security stuff comes with buses now, particularly in terms of protecting student from student? Basically, what supervises the cameras and that type of thing that would
Is included in these buses that were.
Yeah,
We have 24/7 camera systems on all of our buses, which come with 4 cameras, and they record inside and the outside of the bus at the same time, which has worked out very well for us during accidents and things of that nature. So that's the basic use or basic security that we have on the bus, and that does come with this purchase.
Okay, so once we use, let's say, I'm driving a bus and those cameras are in operation, and I get back to the garage. If there's no incidents reported, then we just store that data for a period of time.
Yes, on the 24/7 camera system, everything is recorded and is held in a hard drive for all of the buses. So we can pull any information, anything that went on that bus during route, from the time that ignition switch is turned on until the ignition switch is turned off, and even some past that time, about 15 minutes.
I want to welcome Mr. Weaver to our school district. Mr. Weaver is our new director of transportation, who spoke up. Jim and Dallas are our mainstays, and we appreciate them greatly. But Mr. Weaver, welcome. I believe you're joining us, coming back to Clark County from Jefferson County School, Jefferson City School, excuse me. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Just a comment. If I understand things correctly, tying this back to our legislative agenda, we're spending SPOS 5 funds for these buses because we don't get nearly enough money from the state for transportation. That's a statewide problem.
Yeah,
Just wanted to put
right over.
Yeah.
a little flag on that one. That's why we're doing
That's how these
this.
things
That's how it
come
connects to what we were talking about the other night.
I had one more question about this. So this is purchasing 9 new buses. Is this to replace older buses so we can take those out of service, or do we need
more buses from?
No, it's gonna be used to replace the older buses and to also meet our KPIs. We're getting air conditioner on these buses. The older buses don't have those air conditioning units on.
So the older, 9 older buses will be surplus from this purchase?
That's correct.
Normally you put about, what, 250,000 miles on those buses?
It depending, but that's pretty close.
Well, just that, I wanted to share this because it's disturbing to me, but there's one school district that actually shut down for a week because they could not get the kids to school. It wasn't in Georgia, but it's indicative of what I'm afraid of on down the line.
Great. Thank you for all those comments and questions. Should we go ahead and include this on our consent agenda? Okay. The next item is the approval of air filter service contract district-wide. Any questions around this contract? Yes, Mr. Davis.
I just want to compliment the fact that there's an apprenticeship piece that's built into that. And I'm just very impressed with that, and very thankful. I think our students can benefit a lot.
Just as a side note, obviously these are things that have gone through an RFP process. You delivered a very clear message to our administrative team at last month's meeting. I've asked Ms. Veronica Jackson, Ms. Jackson, if you could just, sorry, Ms. Jackson, just facts. But just wanted to let you know, the board, that Ms. Jackson's leading the process. She's working with legal counsel and Mike Pritt to start looking at how do we create language in all of our RFPs for local vendors and minority contractors, and find and thread that needle of what you asked us to look at through how do you also in a legal way, but also a candid way, how can we get some opportunities for our students? That was the message I received from her last meeting. So Ms. Jackson's our project manager on that. Obviously, she's working closely with our legal counsel, and there will be a team of us that will look at it. Mr. Gilbreth has most of our RFPs, and so that work is started.
Thank you.
It's in addition to our action tactics that are in this document, but it's starting.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. Okay, to include this in our consent agenda? Great.
Yes.
The next item is the approval of payment of the 403B funds to the superintendent. This is coming from a provision of his employment contract.
Right.
Any questions around this item?
Yeah. How did this slip through?
The superintendent did not provide the financial office, the 403B company in time. Our auditors flagged it and said, we have to bring it to the board for permission to pay it for last year.
Gotcha. You were busy or something?
Yeah, right. Just a little.
Just a little.
I wanted to make sure that if it was on our end, that it wasn't something that would ever happen.
It's on.
Okay, it's on me.
Glad we got that buttoned up. Okay, to include this in our consent agenda? Great. That concludes section H of our items. Moving on to section J, personnel recommendations.
I'll just from a highlight standpoint, on the 21st of February, when we have our next our business board meeting, we'll give you an update on how many vacancies we currently have. I think that's information that you've asked that we start providing to you on a monthly basis. If there are other HR type facts or information that you would like us to provide on a monthly basis, please don't hesitate to let me know. Part of the recommendations here, we will finally have, we did a lot of this work without having a full district leadership team. Mr. John Gilbreth has done an amazing job in filling in as our interim district services leader, but we're recommending the hire of Mr. Dexter Fisher to serve as our permanent leader in that space. He's currently with the University of Georgia. and has been in the field of custodial and plant service work for over 30 years. Also, we're really excited about the recommendation for a chief academic officer. While I enjoy kind of burning both ends of the candle, it's time to stop. And we have a very good individual. His name is Brandon Gaskins. Mr. Gaskins is currently the executive director of the Achievement Zone schools in the Fulton County school system. The Achievement Zone schools are the most needy and troubled schools academically, and they're supposed to show growth in those schools. And Mr. Gaskins is used to that type of work, and we're really pleased about presenting both names. Mr. Fisher has indicated if you approve his appointment that he will be able to start April 1st. Mr. Gaskins has indicated March 11th for his start date. With both of these candidates, they were interviewed multiple times. There were entry level interviews that took place, and then there was a cabinet level interview. So there were a total of, in Mr. Fisher's case, there was an entry level interview with staff members that he would typically work with, and then an interview with the cabinet. With Mr. Gaskins, he actually had 4 interviews. We had 2 different interview teams because there's so many people that he would have to work with. So there were teacher leaders, there were principals, there were a number of different voices heard in the first round of interviews. Then there was a cabinet interview where we narrowed down the 3 finalists to the top 2. And as a result of our work with the University of Virginia, we've already started using some of their turnaround strategies. They have a technique called a behavior event interview, where a candidate must tell you and share with you, so what have you done as a professional to turn schools around? So in other words, you can't ask questions like, what's your philosophy on? These are questions that really get down to, so what did you do? We interviewed 2 finalists, and Mr. Gaskins emerged from that process. So he was actually interviewed 4 different times. I know that there was a question at one of our, at the parent advisory board meeting where someone said, so what's a chief academic officer? And we had to explain it's the same position that Norris Price filled, that Mark Tavernier filled, that Monica Gant filled. We just changed the title of it, but it's the same position. It's not adding a new position. It's just simply a different title.
Yes, Dr. Gant.
I have 2 questions. Is what are the criteria as far as like when people apply for jobs, if they have an arrest record?
So what's the criteria? When you say what's the criteria?
How do we, is there a, are there some standards that we go by? Does it depend on the position?
If they have an arrest record. I think it gets really complicated because, what were they arrested for? How long ago was the arrest? So I think all of those different things come into play.
Okay. All right.
But
you're not automatically eliminated to become a candidate or even to be hired for a role based on an arrest, just simply on your arrest record. Now, if you had an arrest and it was a crime against children, we don't.
Sure.
You're not a candidate.
Sure.
But if you were guilty of lewd and lascivious behavior when you were 19 years old and went to the university, we're going to ask you about it. I mean, we'll sit down and say, so something popped up on your record. Can you talk to us about it? And candidly, that conversation kind of tells us if that's still someone we want to work with. If someone says, yes, when I was 19, 25 years ago, I made an awful decision. We continue to look at that candidate. We also look at, it makes your candidacy a little bit harder because then we look at your past work record more closely as well. Did I leave anything out, Ms. Duke?
Okay. My second question, at some point I want to follow back up with that, but maybe it's not
That's fine.
for this meeting.
Sure.
Secondly, how do we know, or how can we be aware? So one of the few responsibilities of the board is to do personnel, hire the superintendent, policy, and budget. On the personnel reports that we get, we do have the actual position that the person is applying for, like the general profile. How can we be aware of the process? You know, so for instance, when a position is posted, then when it's filled, or when someone is interviewed, without sort of overstepping those bounds. And I'm asking because I've gotten feedback, and this is not just feedback since I've been on the board, but before, about concerns about the fairness in hiring policies. And so just trying to figure out, like, how do we responsibly manage or oversee or tend to that in a way to be sure that I know that there has to be some autonomy, right? And building principals and district leaders tend to know what they need. And I think there is also another piece to that there's no shortage of people who have applied for jobs in Clark County who have felt sort of shut out for a variety of different reasons, and sometimes it's reasons that they're not even aware of. So where's the, like, I don't even know if that's our role, but I know we've got 2 personnel lists, and I just wonder how that works.
So there's actual policy around it to start. And then that policy is reviewed by human resources with interview teams prior to the start of the hiring season, and making sure that they stay within the boundaries of that process and the policies. And you referenced it earlier, but there is a level of autonomy when you have so many different divisions, not only all the different schools, but then the departments. And so Ms. Duke does a wonderful job, and her specialists do wonderful jobs in asking questions of, did you follow these components of the process? And we rely on people to tell us, yes, we did, or no, we didn't. If they did not, then we say, well, then that's an invalid process. You have to start over.
And I think as a board governance matter, I think it's a totally appropriate thing to say, I want to understand how this works, right?
Sure.
And we've talked about, even thinking, including HR as some possible presentation or report, and that's something that we can make that request. Help us understand the landscape of how all these people come through into the organization. I think that would be.
Well, I think it's timely because and I know Dr. Knotts as the chair will continue to talk about this, but I think the human resources series of policies is something that the policy committee, then eventually the entire board, is going to dig deeper into. And so that policy that we're referencing, you'll have a chance to really dig into it more, because it does outline the hiring process for the district.
You also mentioned that people are not aware of why they were not hired. Well, some of that you can't share. Give you an example. When I was a principal, I've had people call me, well, I didn't get the job. Why? I don't answer that. Because when you check references, you can't share what a reference have said to you not to hire this person. You can't do that. You can do it, but it gets you in serious problems, okay?
Yeah,
Good question.
I sort of get that piece. I've been on search committees and things like that, but I think there is a piece that we can't assume always happens, and that is that fair and equitable hiring takes place. And while it's not our role to manage that, but as it relates to this report that we get, in my head, I'm just thinking, what are some of the ways that we can help be sort of like stewards of this information, and then to the best of our abilities, being sure that process is in place.
It's a fair question. I think Ms. Duke
I
wants
don't
to
want to
weigh in.
belabor it, but we do an EEOC training every year with all the hiring managers to go over that, because sometimes people do things inadvertently they don't, they're not aware of. And I also, we have hiring protocols that each hiring manager gets and they're reminded of. They have to have a diverse hiring committee and they have to interview a certain number of people, the job has to be posted a certain number of days. And to answer that, they don't know when they got the job. I will give people feedback. I think that's important. I think that's one of our roles, is to help people grow and to help them understand why they didn't get a job. Dr. Thomas responded to one of their questions from one of the CAO candidates. They wanted to know what they needed to work on. And we do like to help people, but yes, sometimes we can't tell the whole story, but we can at least help them in some way as to how they can maybe perform well in that interview.
It does. It certainly helps. There's that little part of me, having been a part of hiring committees in different places other than Clark County, but to be frank, in Clark County as well. Just sort of wanting to be sure that we all continue, because there are like subtle, ways in which we all can sort of create those unfair contexts, and just wanting to be sure that our process, at the very least at that level, we are, it's transparent.
I think it's timely, and I think as you continue to dig into the personnel policies, it's a space where we can dig deeper from a policy perspective.
That's great, thank you. So Davis,
Yeah, just real
any
quick.
questions on the personnel?
Yeah, I'm following up on what Keisha was saying. Have you experienced any districts that have like a process if someone feels like they were denied inappropriately? That there's someone in human resources that they can call upon to look into it? I mean, is that something that we just assume? Because I've like you, I've heard, situations where, this is years ago, but where a principal says, I'm looking for this type of person.
Sure.
And it's not content and it's not academic background. It's there are other factors.
We encourage candidates to contact Ms. Duke in her office when it's for many of the positions in the organization. Candidly, we had a candidate for a principalship last spring indicated they didn't feel that the process was fair to them, and that's when I had to investigate. And so there's investigations that happen if there are candidates who will say, I don't think I was treated fairly, or I wasn't given it just wasn't a fair situation. We will investigate if a candidate indicates that they want us to look into it.
Is that something that we would have a policy for, or you think that's not necessary, or just?
It depends on how, I think that's what Dr. Gant was trying to reference. It really depends on how far you want to go as a governing board. If you want to create the framework, I would say the guardrails from an institutional standpoint, to give people at least the ability to say, if you feel that you need to voice this concern, here's the policy. And that policy then tells you how you reference and contact HR. It's already something that we do in practice, but from a governing standpoint, then it's something where the guardrails are there and you've done your due diligence as a board.
Great. Any other questions around the personnel recommendations? Yes, to vote on next week. Great.
I don't have a question on the personnel recommendation, but I thought about this when we were looking at the consent agenda with the 403B plan with Dr. Means. Ms. Duke,
Yes, sir.
that's something that we can push
We do.
for recruitment. 403B, 457 plan, also Social Security. There are many school systems in the state of Georgia, they don't even be a part of the Social Security plan. And especially dealing with young people, you can push that. And I think that would be a good recruiting tool.
Thank you.
Full 3B is probably the best thing that happened to educators since sliced bread.
Yes, it's an education.
I'm serious.
A lot of people do not know what those are. And
I
so
was a
if
part of
anybody
it for
in the room is
25
your side, I'd like to talk to you
years.
about your 403B opportunity.
Well, thank you, board members. Thank you, Dr. Means. Thank you, staff, and thank you, public, for being here. Hearing nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting.
Absolutely.